Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Spot Real Talk. My name is Tiara.
I'm LaWanda.
And I'm Ron.
And Tiffany is out. I know she is so upset because she really wanted to join in this conversation because we are talking about Atlanta. We just watched the episode 9 of season 3, season 3, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
I think another show that's on season 4. We're on season 3 for Atlanta. And this was good. Oh my gosh, it was so good. So I can't wait to get into this. You guys hang tight, we'll get started. We are back, and like I said, we're talking Atlanta season 3 episode 9, and it was titled Rich Wigga Poor Wigga. So wow, a good one. Another of the unrelated episodes to the season where they kind of like go off script and give us one of these kind of strange episodes where you're not really sure what it's going to be about. They always surprise us with the topic. And I know we seen a preview last week where Kevin Samuels was in there, and everybody was kind of like, "Oh, this is crazy timing," because he had just passed. So rest in peace to him. So this episode, we are getting into this character, and he is a clearly biracial. Well, not clearly, I'll say he's biracial, but he's white passing.
Yeah, you could say clearly. I mean, he was clearly white passing. I mean,
yes.
I mean, first of all, let me say, this was my absolute favorite episode. And for many reasons. I mean, it had the comedic aspect to it. Rest in peace, Kevin Samuels. We did see a glimpse of him and his possible, potential had he, lived. But the whole characterization of Tariq Withers, a name like Tariq, and passing as white, just cracked me up.
Yeah. So the main character you're talking about,
yes,
his real name is Tariq Withers, and he was playing Aaron in this show. And we were having a conversation off screen about him and whether some of this show could have been some of his personal experiences as well. Because with a name like Tariq, he got to have a Black parent somewhere.
Somebody Black somewhere. Okay.
And he went to Florida State and is pledged as an alpha. So I'm like, he got the Black influence. So maybe some of this was his experience. Maybe some of it wasn't. But it's interesting that they chose somebody who is can be white passing, because the real actor could be white passing. And so it kind of starts off this episode with Tariq, and I'm sorry, Tariq is his real name. Aaron is his name on the show. Yeah. And he is having this big argument online with these kids who are playing video games. They're going back and forth. And so as somebody who is white passing, he has a Black father, but he doesn't really identify with being Black. Which is kind of crazy, because you can see that, most people who are biracial, you're going to get your Black parents' influence some way or another, but he doesn't seem to really identify, which I thought was interesting. And I kind of considered, like, how could you grow up like that and not have some kind of influence? And then I immediately thought of like Kellyanne Conway and her daughter. And I was like, her daughter was like so defiant against her parents. Like, they have their own reputation, but she was completely on the opposite end of the spectrum. So I was like, I guess it is possible to be under the same roof and not have the same views as your parents.
Yeah, but that's kind of, I look at that as the same issue that a lot of people in my generation face, that once we graduated from college, we moved into certain neighborhoods and put our kids in certain schools. And although the children, watch that word, children may not even be biracial, but they are in these environments to where they don't have a lot of the same shared experiences that we had as Black or quote unquote Black children growing up. So it's kind of the same thing.
Mm-hmm. And I was thinking too that a lot of how you relate and your perspectives on life are kind of shaped a lot nowadays by social media and a lot of the celebrities that you're influenced by, because you've seen he had the Post Malone poster on the wall, so he's listening to the white rappers. He had the Jake Paul, or I think it was the Logan Paul t-shirt on his wall as well. So I'm like, okay, he's influenced by all these white people. His whole circle of friends is white. And so I guess it shouldn't have come as a shock when he was in the car with his father and he was like, you know, had those views about the teenager who had been shot by the police. And he was basically saying like, oh, they should have just complied or whatever. So
yeah, because he said it'll never happen to him.
Right.
Right.
It begs the question, and I said I would bring this up, are biracial people Black? And it's a question, and one might find it very easily answered. And, you know, we often say yes, but I think it has a lot to do with the person and how they portray themselves. Because on the one hand, you know, it seemed to me his father knew that there was some element of Blackness in him. But at the same time, he wanted him to experience a little more, to have that Black experience, like driving while Black. Of course, that would never happen to him because of his true complexion. And as we'll get to it, but we saw at the end, you know, I have to give him a pass. You know, he sure pulled it off. But I think to answer that question, I don't know if the question can be answered, except to say it just largely depends on how you portray yourself, particularly when you're in that.
I mean, that begs the question on how you define Blackness and what it means to be Black and who's making the definition. And a question we don't often ask is, well, what is white? You know, we're so focused on trying to defend and define ourselves, but we never ask, well, what does it mean to be white? What is that? If it's a social construct, is it about your physical appearance? Is it about genetics and DNA? Is it about culture? Is it about lineage? Or is it about status? Is it about something altogether different?
Right.
Well, it's about power. It's about power and status, because that's, in fact, that's what they gleaned from. And so, which we saw with Aaron, you know, in school, he wanted to be white because that was the construct that he had at school. And that's how he best fit in. But then, you know, when Kevin Samuels says, I'm going to pay for everyone's tuition if you're Black, and suddenly his Blackness came out.
But you know what that made me think of? It made me think of what we define as white can also be considered what it means to be nerd, or what it means to be a gamer or a skateboarder. And so it could be that he had these interests, and he's in a situation where a majority of the people who share his interest are not Black, because you could see, as we'll see later on, the African dude may have the same kind of issues and he looks Black. You know, we were talking about this off screen about why it was in black and white. And it could be that it's just gray. It's not black and white. It's very nuanced. It's very, you know,
it's a gray area.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was kind of thinking along those same lines, because you kind of brought up a topic that I was wanting to touch on, which is like, what is your Blackness? And this episode seems to really focus on, is it defined by your skin color and how you present? Or is it defined on your culture and your knowledge and participation in the culture? And so you've seen that when, like you were saying, Robert, his name was Robert S. Lee in this, which I thought was like, okay, you probably don't want to have your school named Robert Lee either.
Yeah, like not.
They had just changed it from Stonewall Jackson. So you don't change it from one controversial character of the past to another.
So like you change the name of the school, but you don't change your name, and you have a name that's very similar to what, a Confederate general.
Yeah, and so many schools in recent years have done that. I know at least 5 schools around in my area that have changed their names to erase their association with some of these controversial figures of the past. So I like how they brought that topic up into it.
But that again brings all the whole adage of what we call, or what society has been calling, being woke. I don't think Black people necessarily want you to rename. I don't. To me, it's not as much about renaming your school as understanding the struggle, understanding where we came from, and understanding where we are as a people. Because you still have a bunch of hardcore conservatives that believe that because we're not being hung up in trees by the masses anymore, that racism no longer exists, or the idea of racism is all vanished. It hasn't. It's still a ceiling, a glass ceiling hanging over our heads. And so I think this whole construct of being woke is just what we do. Is we just take things to extreme. It's just either one extreme or the other.
But this, I think what becomes a part of this conversation when we're defining Blackness is, well, what is something that is a shared cultural thing among people that we can say you fit into this category? This is quote unquote Black culture. The names of people was something that was very important to indigenous people and African people, any other around the world, right? So I think I like that he brought that up, because like you said, how far are you willing to take it in order to reclaim your culture and who you are? Are you just going to erase the name and make it cosmetic? Because if you're really going to go all the way, you got to change your name from Robert Lee too, because you're named after a Confederate general. It's not enough to just change the name of the school. You got to change your name too.
Mm-hmm. And so to talk about like some of the other students in there, because like you were saying, like once they realized that the scholarship was only meant for Black students, then everybody else who was non-white, or I guess you could say non-white minorities, who are also not technically Black either, but they were trying to figure out a way to get their piece of the pie too. And so you seen the kids in the hallway getting their hair braided, wearing the wave caps. One of them was playing with like a little miniature basketball hoop and stuff. And so it was like, it's funny that they're like trying to feed into these stereotypes, because some of that is true in the scholarship process. And, when you're applying for some of these scholarships that are meant for minorities, sometimes they put you all in the same pot. So not only are you competing with other Black students, but you're competing with all of the minorities, whether they be Indian or Asian or whatever. Well, and so then, just to finish that thought, I was going to say that you basically what I'm thinking of is like when he said specifically for Black people, it brought up the thought of the reparations conversation. Because if you are to have this something like reparations that's specifically meant to, make reparation for deeds and misdeeds that were done to Black people in the past, then how do you qualify that? And how are you making sure that people who did not participate in that struggle don't try to get their hands in the pot on it too?
Well, as I was saying to LaWanda before the show started, that, my grandmother was Blackfoot. And it's quite well known that the American Indian accepted Blacks, and that's why we commingled with them. And so there's so many Black folks that have Indian blood. If I were to show you a picture of my grandmother, she looks starkly different than I do. But yet, as LaWanda said, don't give me money in form of reparations. Give me back my land that you stole. So go ahead, LaWanda.
But I was gonna say he recognized that, because you heard him the dad called him Kimosabi, right? Mm-hmm. So like if we were to really get into this race question, then the Native question is gonna come up, because a lot of Black people, the idea of being Black is a status issue. It doesn't mean that it could mean that you're Indian and African. It could mean that you're all full-blood Native American, because those people were dark-skinned people too, red or dark-skinned. And I don't know that looking at them, you could always tell who was who. Mm-hmm. It's this classification and this status that would entitle you to certain benefits and rights, whether you were white or Black. That's what we're really talking about. And I thought it was interesting that he said, "Oh, Kimosabi." I was like, okay, he just threw it all in there.
Uh-huh. And, going back to Kevin Samuels and his prove, well, should call him by his name in the show, Robert. Because when he called everybody in to basically like audition to qualify their Blackness, he was asking them like so many questions that were related culturally. And so what this show is doing this time around is, like I said, they were basing your Blackness on your participation in the culture and how much you knew. And so, you know, we're gonna see if y'all got some questions, some answers to these questions, because some of them I was like, I don't even know if I can relate to these.
Right.
I don't know what goes in Hennessy. I don't know what else goes in Hennessy.
But I did like the idea of rum. So
well, I definitely heard of Hennessy with like a dark soda. So you could do like a Coke or a Pepsi or something like that. I've heard of Hennessy with the hypnotic. That's the Incredible Hulk drink.
Oh, yeah. He said ice.
I'm like, you got me. I don't really know because I don't even like Hennessy from the jump. The next thing was Will or Jada or Bobby and Whitney.
Bobby and Whitney.
I wrote Bobby and Whitney too. Now, Holy Ghost or the Holy Spirit?
It's the Holy Ghost. It's got to be the Holy Ghost.
Y'all gotta have the Holy Spirit up in there. Come on now.
No,
Holy Ghost.
That's the Holy Ghost all day long.
They also asked, now, do y'all know why the 5 Heartbeats broke up?
It's because he was dating his girlfriend, right? Is that what it was? Or the contract? It was a lot of stuff. It was the contract.
He got killed. Duck and his brother was beefing because he was dating the girlfriend. Quiet Boy wanted to go out on his own and be solo. Eddie King was over here on drugs.
But look, a lot of those questions, I was like, dang, you might call me white because you know.
All right, last one. How long can chicken sit on the stove?
Oh,
look,
no longer than an hour, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know, no, it can sit long. If it's cooked, chicken can sit, you know, for a long time. You cover it, and you can have chicken on the stove all day long if you want, you know. But it's got to be cooked and covered, you know.
Is that the answer then? That it can sit all day?
That question might be subjective.
Look, when I grew up in Southeast, you know, we cooked some fried chicken. It was deeply fried, and we covered with some aluminum foil, and that thing sat on the oven. I mean, on the stove. Hell, half the night, you know, and we were.
But you see, that's why a question like that is based on your participation in the culture.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily based on if you Black by skin color definition.
Yeah, you know, you cook some raw.
And there were a lot more. And I thought it was hilarious because it kind of reminded me of the Chappelle Show when he did the race draft. And you know, they were drafting people like Bill Clinton and things like that. And it wasn't based on skin color. It was like, we want you because you act Black and you can relate to the Black experience.
True, but sometimes tracks with class. Some things track with being a Southerner. Yes. You know what I mean? It'll be a lot of overlap that you won't be able to tell what's what.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like my parents, they Rocky Mount, North Carolina, Rocky Mountain, Greensboro, North Carolina. Oh my God.
Yeah.
A lot of Southern, and you know, I got Southern blood. I always say.
And you know, the comedic timing of like having George Wallace in the show as one of the judges. I mean, he was so hilarious talking about like Clarence Thomas and things like that. Like that's somebody that Black people don't like to be associated with necessarily or compared to.
He said you went too far calling him Clarence.
He was like, he ain't that white. And he said, oh, he off white.
Which it begs the issue again. You know, here Clarence Thomas is dark as I am, if not darker. And you know, most of us consider him white because of his ideology.
And that's part of the point of the show, I think, is that it's like trying to figure out like what is Blackness, because you can be brown skinned or dark skinned and still not relate to your own culture.
But having 3 people decide, like who are the people who get to judge and to determine what is, you know, what is Blackness and what is not.
Right. And that's why I like the end of this episode, especially because we kind of got to see a role reversal. Because Kevin Samuel's character, Robert Lee, he is kind of acting as the authority and the judge on who's Black and who's not. And, you know, towards the end, you see that, and this is, I guess there's some commentary to be had there on the 2 boys that felt rejected from the culture, with Aaron feeling rejected and the Nigerian boy who has brown skin but doesn't relate to the experience. He felt rejected from the Black culture. And so I guess they felt like if we can't have it, if we can't participate and be in this and benefit from it through the scholarship, then we're gonna burn the whole thing down. Ain't nobody getting it.
But it
And
does.
so that's a conversation too about like, okay, what's going to come of this? Like, even if Black folks were to get reparations, if they were to get any form of, I guess you could say any form of reparation,
But it
the
comes.
people that can't participate in it,
But it
how
begs.
are they going to respond? And does it become like a situation where it's sabotaged purposely?
But it begs the issue of culture as it relates to what color or what you are, with being Black and white. I mean, think about it. White people tend to look at us who speak well and have a command of the English language is more accepting because they look at it as a part of their culture. And when we adapt, or when they think that we are adapting to their culture, not just learning and having the ability to learn, but when they think that we're adapting to their culture, they say we fit in more. And I think the episode did very well. And I think that's why it was in Black and white, because it really showed the struggles of Blacks and whites with this cultural understanding of what makes you you, whether you're Black or white. And Aaron had to deal with both instances at that point. You know, is he Black? Is he white? And he was able to, as we saw, he was able to fit in both situations.
Yeah.
You know, we're watching this show in a context of it's Atlanta, and then the larger context is in America. But I think the issue between Aaron and the Nigerian boy is that it's a global issue.
Right.
It's not just us, it's the fact that we, if you look at it from an ancient perspective, we were one people, a big family, men with different names, different clans, different nations on the sides of the ocean, all around the globe, right? People who shared the same kind of cultural traditions. And we've been split up partly because of this colonial strategy of divide and conquer all around the globe, not just in America. And so you have these two people here who turn around and fight against each other when they want the same thing.
Yeah.
Basically because of this definition. Like, it's crazy.
And Aaron said it. And Aaron said it. He said to the African kid, you know, he said, you know, you come from a place where you knew your background, your history, your people, yada, yada, yada.
Yes.
And it's so true. But again, it's that cultural warfare that we have to fight amongst each other. You know, we get here and America has just messed things up for us so much that where do you see?
It seemed like, so I don't like to overgeneralize, but the second that Aaron didn't get his way with anything, like at the beginning when he was gaming, he resorted to like racial slurs and he was using the hard ER.
Yeah.
If he had just dropped the R, he might have been a little better off, you know.
And he did it again to the Nigerian boy, like making fun of his color, like his skin tone and stuff like that. So I was like, you know, it's just crazy how that mindset that I don't get my way, so I have to be derogatory to you comes out. And then to go on to like the thing with the Black man, Robert, being in charge of who is getting what, because we seen that both Aaron and the Nigerian kid committed the same exact crime. They were both carrying a flamethrower. Aaron had his white privilege carrying it out in the open, but the Nigerian kid said he had to assemble his behind a dumpster somewhere. But albeit the fact of the matter is that they committed the same crime, but Robert's character got to decide who he was going to let slide. And he decided in that in that instance, that it was going to be a role reversal, and the kid that had the Black appearance was going to get off and get the scholarship and get sent to the better hospital to make sure he survives.
Well, it's because he got shot. And so
right. And he said, he said getting shot by the police
in Blackness
is the blackest thing you can do.
Right. The blackest thing you can do is be shot by a cop. And so he instantly became Black. All his culture meant nothing.
That's the point, because nobody asked the question. When the cop came, he saw two people there. He only shot one.
Right.
Exactly. Because like you were saying, when the cop showed up, he shot the brown skinned kid. And so that's where you could see Aaron still had his white privilege of coming off as white. But once Robert came into the picture, Robert said, this brown skinned boy is going to get off clean. And Aaron, you are getting arrested.
Well, we also have to remember Aaron dropped his his gun, his gun while running from the African. So he dumped it in the alley as he was running. So when he looked up and the kid was on top of, on the rooftop of the school or whatever, the guy still had the gun and he pointed it at Aaron. And that was my reasoning for him getting shot, because he had a gun pointing at someone. Aaron didn't have flamethrower, and Aaron didn't have his at the time, because he had because the boy burned his feet, and then in attempts to run, he just took off his flamethrower and kept running. Now, of course, I got the analogy of what was going on.
Right, because we knew they both had the same intentions to go up there and set that school on fire.
Right.
And so it's like, you see white people do it all the time. They protect their own. There are so many instances where two people commit the same crime, and just because they are different races, one gets a heftier sentence than the other.
Well,
so in this case, we've seen that too. But in
that's
reverse.
class. But that's class too, because the Nigerian boy made the point that Aaron's thing was put together and homemade, whereas he had the actual real flamethrower.
Right.
So,
that's true too. Yeah, so it was like this, it was just a very interesting take on, on Blackness and on people who can pass as white, and even on college, because college in general, going back to the scholarship, having parents that can afford to do that, that's a privilege, and not a lot of Black people have that privilege, because that generational wealth isn't transferred in our communities like it is in other communities. And so we don't always have the luxury of just being able to send our kids to school, no problem. And so with Aaron trying to go to his father to ask for the FAFSA application information, his dad didn't even want to participate in the application process. And I think that hesitancy by older generations to take out loans is understood, but FAFSA isn't just loans. You can also get grants. You can also do like work off your debts. And so things like that, you still got to apply, but his dad didn't even want to do that.
right.
because it's a distrust of a system that's asking
Yes.
you to voluntarily give all of this financial information that you wouldn't normally give,
But it's also a comment on, so not only did Aaron have, his dad told him basically pay your own way through school, but you also got to pay rent. And I hate that happens in our communities, because like sometimes it's like, oh, you 18, you grown, either get out or you got to contribute to this household. Whereas some other communities, they don't have that spirit of like, you got to do this or else you can't live in my house. It's, I want to do what I can to help build you towards a better future. And I think that in our families, we need to start doing more of that, fostering, because at 18, you don't know who you are. You don't know who you're going to be. How do you expect a kid to just get out here and figure it out while paying rent and going to college and trying to figure out life in general? It's so much pressure to put on a child. And then you add the stress of being a Black male.
Well, it's interesting because my father said to me when I turned 18, with my twin brother and I, and my mom and dad, he just looked up and said one day, there are too many adults in this house.
I hate that.
Two of you got to go.
So I think that's it's a cultural thing. It's something that we lost, because if who we were, that would not have happened.
Sure.
But who we are now, it's about being in this system,
But it does build something in us though, because I hate to see a 30, 40-year-old man still living at home with his mom.
Right.
And you get that, particularly in other cultures. You
Oh,
have,
yeah. I mean, I understand tough love, but also set your kid up for success. Like, don't put them on the path to failure from the jump.
And that's a part of the culture that we lost, because a lot of the culture and the rites of passages were geared towards that, of making sure that you grew into a well-developed, functioning human being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then like even down to the stereotype that some of the other white students had about Black people going to college, because their first thing to say was like, oh, he'll drop out in a year and go straight to the MBA. And I'm like, well, why does it always have to be that the only way that most Black kids get to school is through a sports scholarship? Like that's Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. Two things about that. One, they were talking about Black people around him, not knowing he was Black. That was the other thing. So he got to hear how they really thought. But to your point on that, if he's going on an athletic scholarship, he's not going to school for free. He's working for that. That's what was crazy to me. Like,
Yeah,
like they missed that part, that he's gonna make the university a whole bunch of money. So it wasn't a fair exchange.
exactly, man. You are speaking, preaching right now, because I thought that same thing. And it was only recently now that a lot of these athletes are being allowed to make money off of their likeness being used by the schools. But I was going to add that, the school is making just as much money, way more off the athlete than paying for just that little bit of tuition.
Billions, and to have your likeness and your image, and you can't get paid a dime, and your parents or family members can't afford to come and watch a game because you're in another state, and that's okay. And you think that the education is worth I mean, when you look at the cost of education and the amount of money that the colleges are making off you and your back, it doesn't even compare. The colleges are making billions of dollars, and and that little bit of, not to, education is an important thing, but you own me lock, stock, and barrel for 4 years.
Mm-hmm. And not only that, but just to suggest that you couldn't get into a college based on your knowledge or your own academic merits, like it just got to be a scholarship for sports.
Okay.
I was like, this is outrageous. And it was so funny that they said it to his face, not knowing.
Well, it's interesting how white people can claim affirmative action and how negative and how wrong it is, but they were born on affirmative action. The whole system is based on affirmative action for whites. So what are you talking about? Exactly. I mean, come on, what are you talking about? Don't even let me get started on that. But
I thought it was funny how they showed a social media culture and how people celebrate on the gram and how it's so like just outrageous. And it made me think on the one hand, like, okay, that's who we are. We express ourselves in the way we do, but it also, I don't even want to say this, but it sometimes does us a disservice because people don't understand the culture and they put this label on it, right? And so whereas we say that's how we are, we celebrate outwardly like that, people look at you like you're uncultured. And I'm like, well, what is cultured anyway?
It's funny though, because some people will criticize you for it, but at the same time, other people who are non-Black want to participate. Like our culture is so popular, it's fun, and it's appealing. And so a lot of people always say, like, everybody wants to be Black until it's time to really be Black. And we've seen that so many times this episode. Like I said, going back to the Indian kids, they wanted to participate. They were singing Shy, If I Ever Fall in Love. Like they love our music, they love our culture, but if they had to deal with all that comes along with it, then it's like, oh, I didn't want that part. I only wanted this.
Right.
But there's a theory that if you look at it, if everybody on the planet comes from a Black woman, then everybody is somehow practicing some form of self-hatred because they deny that Blackness, they deny that Black origin until it's a benefit. Because I'm telling you, if they offer reparations, people are gonna shake that tree. These folks gonna come out the woodwork, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
You gotta know it. And they will they'll have all types of complaints. Trust.
My great grandmother always told us this story, but we were just so afraid.
Yeah, and that goes back to that the other episode where they were trying to get that reparations from the white people, his wife, the dude's wife was like, oh, I'm Peruvian now. She started trying to identify as something other than white. So it's just funny to see how that change up happens when being Black is beneficial. Let me hop on this. So by the end of the episode, we see that Aaron has completely embraced his Blackness. He's got the low cut with the parts in it, got the chain. He's changed up his whole entire wardrobe. And he got his little wave brush, brushing his thoughts, like I said on camera, because he sure enough ain't have no waves.
And he can brush till the cows come home. There will be no waves.
But that's an interesting commentary on that. Do you have to go to jail or whatever is that a rite of passage for Black men to become Black men?
Yeah, because he had the complete change up. We see he
Mhm.
didn't get off from the incident. We're assuming he went and served jail time and ended up definitely not going to college, but instead working at the electronics department of some store. So, he had to move on with life. And, he didn't get to go to college. Everybody else around him got to move on. And he was the one that was kind of left stagnant in, a job that he may or may not even like.
And I don't think going to jail is it's our story because of what happened in the late 70s and 80s, with this war on drugs, and they just swooped up as many Blacks as they can to fill the private jails so that, again, more white folks can make that money on our backs. It's not our culture, it's our story. And that's the way it's been. And it still exists to a large degree. We're 13% of the population, but we overwhelm the jails by over 60, 70% of 60 plus 70% of the jails are filled by Blacks, but we're only 13% of the population. So there's a problem with that. I used to work at and I won't say what news organization, but there was in Montgomery County a real point to suppress whites being arrested. They literally wouldn't give us that information. Whereas if a Black boy is arrested, you see him up on the news, his face and everything before his mother even knows he's been arrested. So there's a lot that goes on. We tend not to, or we tend to miss because we just don't know.
Well, I guess what I was saying is that even with the panel is the things that they want to attribute to Black culture sometimes are negative things, or things that maybe not speak to the highest expression of our culture. Maybe it expresses something, because I'm thinking about even Donald Glover and his brother. Mm-hmm. If you sit down and have a conversation with them, they may not come off to you as typical Black people, but look, he totally gets it. He's showing you a show that he's a part of the experience. And so what I think I said that is because at the beginning of the show, we don't see him that way. But by the end of the show, after he's had this encounter with law enforcement, now he Black on top of Black on top of Black. He got swag at this point.
Yeah, and not only that, but embracing his Blackness. He seen his past girlfriend in there after he had just flirted with the Black chick. He said that he was even more attracted to the white woman now that he had embraced his Blackness. And I was like, so there's some commentary there too, because, a lot of times the Black men can have the Black women, but they want the white women too. And sometimes even more, because I guess it's like that they deem like a status symbol or something to aspire to. Like the white woman is even more attractive to me now that I am like embracing my Blackness. So even when he was presenting white, he liked the white girl and it was cool. But once he became Black, he all of a sudden liked her even more.
Well, but you saw who she was in their DMs, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, she was in the DMs of the Black guy at school.
So that's commentary too about what their preference is too.
And in fact, I started to say it was interesting how she warmed up to him once he threw that little Blackness on her. And and she was like, because she was all ready to go. And when he turned around and said what he said, she kind of warmed up really quick. So it says to me more so they wanting us even more than, what it appears, because I don't know. It is what it is, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, well, she had already showed him who she really was early episode when she made that comment around him.
Oh yeah, when she showed her whiteness when she wanted to break up with him because he couldn't get the money to go to school. That was, I mean, wow, really?
And there's something to be said about that too, because I like how this episode really focused on like the reality of the situation. Like you can present white all you want, but at the end of the day, white people don't view you in that way. They see whether you're Nigerian, whether you're mixed race, whether you're Trinidad or Jamaica or wherever you're from, they throw us all in the same pot. You just Black if you're in America. They don't care where you come from. If you are not white or if your skin color is a certain way, we are all in the same pot. And so I think that he got to experience that in that instance because he had used that privilege of white passing for so long, but that white privilege didn't get him what he wanted in the end. And it could have been written that way. It could have, because he was in all of these, in association with so many of the white people. They could have been like one of their parents. They could have took him on as a charity case and been like, oh, well, we gonna fund your education, whatever. Like he had the access to people that had it, but it didn't play out that way. And I like that it didn't, because we get to see the reality of the situation.
I kind of looked at that last scene as if part of him embracing Blackness was he's finna spit game at this point. Like whatever he said to her, I don't think he meant it. I think it was game.
It was just game.
I think he learned game.
By the way, he looked at that camera at the end.
You saw how he was talking to the sister, and it was just game. And so when you said that to her, she ate it up. She didn't know what.
I think he was saying, I'm trying to see how I can get her to pay for my college. That's what I got.
I seen some talk on Twitter about that too, and how taking on like the Black male style of dress and swag, like that's been co-opted. And so like I think that might have been some commentary on that. We see that all the time, especially in the music industry with, rappers. They take on the Black male style and swag, and even people talk about Chet Hanks kind of doing the same thing, trying to take on this cultured swag to attract, because all he really dates is Black women in real life. So it's like,
but I wonder about that because, but then that's back to the question. His father is Black. It's in his DNA, so part of it is what you present, but the other part of it is the question of genetics and DNA and what role does that play into it?
Right. And this episode seemed to throw all of that out the window, saying like, that don't even matter. If you don't participate in the culture, you're not Black.
But doesn't matter to who. That's the other thing about the breed of people, because, I think there are some people who have a different view of Blackness who will say all of that is foolishness, and that doesn't even represent the culture.
Right. Again, it's all about class. I think it's actually more about class than it is about race. So, and it showed that. I mean, think about a tribunal asking, of all the questions you can ask that would be representative of a Black person, there were quite ridiculous questions.
And like none of it was based on your genetics or lineage, nothing. What you would think, at least some of it would be.
But there's on Instagram, DallasBlack.com, they have a urban trivia night and they've been playing stuff. And so I've been watching it. So they were asking the same questions like, well, what does Genuine say on the song? I'm like, I know the song. I don't know. I have no idea.
Do I care? That's the other thing. I care less.
I'm like, I'm keeping my card though.
Right.
You can't revoke it.
So, I mean, overall, I really enjoyed this episode. I like Ron said, I think it's up there with like one of my top few favorites. I don't know where I'm ranking it yet. I got to watch it a couple more times, but it was definitely good. And I love how this season, we say this time and time again, but they're using half of the episodes to kind of give commentary specifically on the Black experience. And I mean, I love the characters where the episodes where the main characters aren't in it. I love the ones with them in it too, but I think that they're more powerful, the ones that don't have the main characters in it, because they're really talking about stuff that needs to be talked about in this show, and doing it through comedy, doing it through like satire and a lot of irony.
I know, I laughed. I screamed when they had him in there dancing and trying to audition.
Yeah.
So, he said, "You white."
Yeah, really had him in there shucking and driving to prove himself.
This show went full throttle in terms of Black culture. So I loved it. It will go down as my best episode.
And loose ends, I know they catalog got to be booming.
Oh,
from Atlanta with the song they had, this Hanging by a String.
Yeah.
And then they had it from BMF.
That was interesting too, right?
Funny thing is, I had to go pull it up and play it myself.
Because it said Hanging by a String when they said Robert Lee.
Yeah. So I was like, if the youngins ain't familiar with loose ends, a lot of the shows, either this one or BMF, they gonna get familiar. So I know they catalog got to be jumping.
Oh, I bet it's in their catalog. That's great music.
Shout out to George Wallace with the blonde fro. I love it.
Yeah, I think I seen somebody on Twitter say that the only person that they could have put in that judging seat that would have been better than George Wallace would be Paul Mooney.
Yes. Oh, yes.
So, but overall, I mean, they killed it this episode with the commentary. And then with the casting, I thought the casting was spot on, perfect. And just overall, the dialogue and the commentary and the comedy in this show, they are really doing a great job. I'm enjoying it. I'm so sad Tiffany couldn't be here to join in the conversation because I know she was like burning up, ready to talk about it. So we'll have to get her thoughts on this episode later on. Do you guys have anything else you want to add? Anything we missed or left out?
Nope. R.I.P. Paul Mooney. You mentioned his name. Shout out to the ancestor.
Yeah, and R.I.P. Kevin Samuels. I know he was a controversial figure as well. Which was, you got something to add about that?
What this would have done for his career.
Yeah,
we'll never know, but I wonder.
I think that that might have been the catalyst to open up doors for him in theater. I mean, in television.
Yeah, because I think it's iconic. I think this is an iconic episode. And yeah.
So yes, like you said, we'll never know. So RIP to him. And please, you guys, drop down in the comment section and give us your thoughts on this episode as well. I mean, it was so much stuff going on. I had trouble organizing my thoughts and like trying to digest everything because these episodes are so jam-packed with things. Like if it's not specifically speaking on it, they got like imagery in the background and you got to watch it several times to like pick up on everything. So you guys drop down in the comments and give us your thoughts on this episode as well. And it looks like next week is the season finale and we're going to be back with the main characters. So hopefully we get some of our questions answered and they can wrap up some of the loose ends about where the relationship with Darius and Paperboy and Earn is heading and what's going on with Van. I mean, there's still so many things that are kind of left floating in the air. So hopefully we get some closure by next week, or who knows, they might even drag it into season 4. Who knows? Yeah, but I'm looking forward to it. It's been a great season so far, so I'm sure it won't disappoint. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's watching. Please make sure that you click the subscribe button on our channel and also the notification bell so that you get alerted every time we post, and also like this video. We are also on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, all social media platforms pretty much. You can find us at The Spot Real Talk, so be sure to give us a follow there as well. Any last words?
Got it.
All right, well, on that note, we are going to call it a night and we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, I'm watching the rise, and I wouldn't say I'm shocked cause I'm hardly surprised. This one's for the ride, this one's for who knew I'd make it, just needed some time. This one's for my wife, could've left 1,000 times just so by my side. This one's for the grind, I knew it would happen, just had the strength in my mind. To the videos, they thought I was a black guy. That's hard to get over. I'm foreigner in the sport, but I'm fully devoted. I don't take it for granted that the door's been open.